everyone who has joined us so far. This is the Managing Job Shadow Experiences in Compass, which is in RUReady.ND.gov virtual workshop today. Just admitting a few people as we're getting started here. My name is Laura Glaser. For those of you who have not met me, I'm the Career Resource Manager for North Dakota Career and Technical Education. Today's session is being recorded, so for any reason you have to drop off of this, just know that you'll be able to catch up and see the remainder on the recording. If you do have any questions during the session, feel free to raise your hand, your virtual hand, or just drop your questions in the chat. And if I'm able to answer them, I'll do so throughout. And if there are questions that Patrick needs to answer, we will definitely have a little bit of time at the end for questions. And with that, I would like to thank Patrick Minear for joining us today to tell us all about some great new features that are in Compass that are going to make managing job shadow experiences a lot smoother and more efficient for you. So welcome, Patrick.
Thank you, Laura, and hello, everybody. If for those of you that haven't met me, my name is Patrick Minear, and again, I'm the CEO and founder of Golden Path Solutions. And we are the company that builds the application Compass that is available within Are You Ready? And is used for a variety of different things. But today I want to talk to you, like Laura said, about job shadows. And some of you on this call have already gone through some presentations with me. So if you have, hopefully you'll get a few nuggets out of this presentation. The other thing that we'll do as we go through this is we'll share some tips and tricks on how you can use this to get more employer engagement, maybe get students connected to employers in different ways. We're constantly looking for ways to optimize that school-employer-student connection, and job shadows are a fantastic way to do that. So what I'm going to do for today's session is I'm going to talk to you about what job shadows are and traditionally how we were able to help facilitate students and schools finding companies willing to offer shadows. Then I want to walk you through the new system, which is going to basically cover the overall process that includes both employers, you all, and your students. We'll talk about the approval processes, how you can do things on behalf of the employer if you want, and even how we can help you set up calendar invites, manage schedules, and see kind of all the different things that you've got going on with shadows for your students. I'm going to start with some slides, but I actually think it's always more interesting to see how things work in real life. So I will actually be doing a live demo with a test student and a test employer and a test school. So you can follow along. I'll share some tips and tricks with you and also some next steps. Just like we're getting you all up to speed on this process, we're also going to be working on getting our employers up to speed. So what you're going to be seeing in the next few months from us is a lot of communications to employers about how this works, what they should expect when they're getting emails about job shadow requests, and then also some new features or some things that we've already got in the works to make this process even better. Like Laura said, I love for this to be interactive, so please raise your hand or click on the hand button, and I'll pause to ask or to let you ask questions. Also, feel free to put comments in the chat, and we can pause, make this as interactive as possible. We'll also be sending out a quick, like we're calling them kind of a quick reference guide that will kind of describe some of what you see in a one-page summary, so it's a little bit easier for you to take that after the session is over and use the system. So I think we all kind of know what job shadows are. Job shadows are really intended to be a way for a student to have an experience with an employer that is more meaningful than maybe a visit at a career fair or at a class visit, usually on site, on location with an employer. Usually it's anywhere from an hour to like a half a day, in some cases, maybe a full day, but it's really intended to be kind of a quick drop-in, a quick introduction, maybe a tour, maybe some introduction to different team members, maybe watching people work for a few hours, really trying to give the student a taste of what it's like to work at a particular company. And maybe even different jobs. We've had several employers offer job shadows in different departments. The thought is I'm going to use Goldmark Industries, the property manager based out of Fargo. They might want a student to understand what it's like to be a property manager, but then they also want that student to understand jobs in the office where they're maybe managing leases or they're doing compliance work. So give the student a taste of different things. Those are all scenarios for job shadows. What we've also heard from some employers is if they're wanting to do work-based learning, they actually want to use a job shadow as a prerequisite. We'd love the student to come out, maybe hang out with us for a couple hours, make sure it's a good fit, learn a little bit more about them, and then if that works, we will then offer them a full internship. So the way that this has worked in the past, sometimes it's unstructured. Sometimes students are setting up their own job shadows. Sometimes employers are offering job shadows. There are two ways today that employers in Compass could indicate that they're willing to do a job shadow. The first one is when the employer signs up and they basically they join what we call the connections database. They can check the box for job shadows as something they're willing to offer, and then you will see that both in the Compass console and also in the Are You Ready organizations tab in the Pro Center. In the example on the left, you can see how I selected job shadow as the connection type. So that shows me all the employers that are willing to offer job shadows. I could export this list, give it to a student, and say, have at it. Go call these companies. Every company has a contact name, a phone number, an email. So that's one option. It's a little bit more like you've got a database of employers that are willing to offer shadows. Some employers had also been posting work-based learning opportunities as a job shadow as a work-based learning opportunity. So you can see some examples of that on the right. Wallwork Trucking, Watford City, Sincere Smiles, they had created job shadow opportunities that students would apply to just like work-based learning, but it really isn't work-based learning. Ideally, work-based learning, we want it to be a sustained experience, 40 hours or more. You all have different policies. A job shadow isn't really that, but we did that because we wanted to give employers a way to get used to the process of posting opportunities. So those were the two current options that employers had for getting job shadow offers out to students and to you all. This is now a new way of managing those processes. So I'm just going to keep going. Again, if there are any questions, please raise your hand or put in a comment. The new shadow management process, we actually built this in conjunction with some of our schools. I'll give a shout out to Grand Forks that really worked with us a ton on feature requirements and best practices and scenarios on the processes that they follow. But essentially what we've come up with is what you see on this slide. So the student would basically see the employers that have opted into offering job shadows, and they can add that to basically think of it almost like a shopping experience. I can add companies that I want to shadow to my list. I can prioritize my list. What's my first choice, second choice, third choice? I can put in the jobs that I'm interested in learning about. I can just type those in. I can even request employers that aren't in Compass or even a job that I want to shadow, and I'm not even sure what employer offers it. So if a student wanted to, say, do a job shadow with a cybersecurity software developer, they could put that in. They don't have an employer necessarily that's offering that they're aware of, but they can put in the job, submit that to you all, and then that goes to the next step where we can help get that student connected. Once the student submits their requests, then you as an educator can essentially choose which ones you want to approve, which ones you want to reject. If you reject them, you can provide a reason that goes back to the student. And for the ones that you approve, you can decide how involved you want the employer to be. Do you want the employer to get an email and they approve the job shadow request on their own and provide input to you on the timing? Do you want to contact the employer and work it out with them? Or do you even want the student to do that directly? Because we have the contact information, you can make those decisions yourself. When the job shadow is scheduled, you can also send invites to the student. You can send invites to yourself or to a parent or whoever you want. And then you can track the shadows in an overall calendar. The other thing you can do, for those of you that are using Compass for electronic agreement management and signatures, you can also fire off agreements related to a job shadow. In some cases, you might be using that for a permission absentee slip, like letting me be absent from a class, or if you need parental consent for any reason. Maybe the employer has a requirement where you have to watch some kind of safety video before you come. Those are things that you can use the agreements to make sure that those things are done before the shadow can actually happen. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through some slides that describe these different processes. And then, like I said, I'm going to do a demo so we can kind of see how it all works real time. Any questions on anything yet before I proceed? Okay, I'm going to keep going. Okay, so there are a couple of different ways that a student can request a job shadow. And these are all done within Compass. If you're a North Dakota high school student, you're accessing Compass through Are You Ready? If you're using Compass in a standalone way in Minnesota or South Dakota or Montana, you would log directly into Compass or Clever or whatever solution for single sign-on. And you may have seen that we also just recently are rolling out Compass to colleges. So in that case, college students would also log in directly to Compass. But the process is the same. Once they're in Compass, they would go to opportunities and then employers. And there are two ways that they can basically add job shadows to their list. If a company has opted into offering job shadows, if they've checked that box, then that company's card is going to have an icon that is circled, which is basically our icon for job shadows. The student would select that, and that will add that employer to their list of shadows. So in the example on the left, the student has selected North Dakota Department of Transportation as wanting to do a job shadow. Cardinal IG directly to the right has not been selected because their icon is not filled in. So that's one option. That's particularly nice if the student wants to filter down on employers that are meaningful to them. So they would click this filters button. They could then filter on industry, on career cluster. They could filter on any companies offering work-based learning. They could filter on distance. There's a lot of different options they have. And ultimately, they can narrow down to who are the 5 or 6 companies that I really am interested in that I want to shadow. And then I'll add them to my list. The other way they can do it is they can just click on Request Job Shadows, and then they can basically add employers to their list. And it's a little bit of a less, they don't have to do filters. There's a lot more employer information that they see just available to them. But in that case, I can basically go through the list of employers and I can click the box Show Interest, and that will essentially add them to my list too. I can also search for employers on both cases. If I just want to type in the name of the employer and see if they're there, then I can add them to my list. If the employer is not in the list, let's say they aren't set up in Compass, or maybe they have opted not to share their information with your school for whatever reason, the student can still request a shadow. All they do is they click Employer Not Listed in the Job Shadow Request screen. Then they can enter whatever information they know about that particular opportunity that they want to shadow. We make either employer name or job required, one or the other. So if the employer was like, or the student was like, I really, really, really want to do a job shadow with Devil's Lake cars, but they're not in the system. They could type in Devil's Lake cars, and maybe they know that they want to shadow an auto technician. In another case, maybe a student really wants to do a job shadow with a company that maybe they've heard of, but they don't know much about. They could put in the employer name and leave the job blank. The student could also, if they really want to shadow some other, they don't maybe want to look through the employers, or they don't know what employers are offering. So like a phlebotomist, the student could also just type in phlebotomy or phlebotomist, or, blood work, or whatever they want to type in under job. They can then submit that and you'll get that. And then you can work with the student to find a company that maybe offers that. If the student is putting in an employer name and they maybe have a connection, we've heard a lot of times like students wanting to do shadows, maybe with a company their parent works at. They can put in an employer contact name, they can put in an email or a phone number if they have it, and you will have access to that, which will facilitate your ability to reach out to that employer and get connected. But we definitely want to use the list of employers as one data source, but we know that not every employer is going to be in Compass. So this is a nice way for a student to request a shadow from that employer. When the student has selected all the different shadows that they want to drive, they can prioritize them by using the arrows that are circled on the left. So they can move things up, they can move them down, they can type in the job if they didn't already do that. And then when they're ready, they can submit these to you all. And that's where you're going to get involved in this process. When the student hits submit, you're going to get an email that a student has requested a shadow. And then you'll be able to log into the Compass console and approve it and manage the employer process as well. Any questions on the student experience before I'm flipping to the educator experience? Okay. So there's really two steps for you as the educator. The first one is you approve the request from the student. So in the little box that's on the left, that is essentially all the student requests that you've gotten. And it's going to be one row per student. So if a student has requested 5 job shadows, you're going to see that student's name. You can click on the student, and then you will see all the different job shadows that they've requested and their preference. And then you can approve them or reject them. If you approve them, it goes to the next step where you're going to now work with the employer or you're going to get them scheduled. And if you reject them, it's going to go back to the student and they're basically going to, you're going to give a reason why you rejected it. In the example that I'm showing on the screen, you'll see that the employer doesn't exist. So I have a button that I can actually click to create the employer. If you all recall, we just introduced the ability for you all to create employers for your schools. Essentially there, what you would do is put in the address, a very high level overview, or even just the word overview, and then an email of somebody at that company, and then you can invite them to actually create an account in Compass and manage this process. But it's not required. You can also just manage this directly with the student without the employer being involved. And likewise, you can actually hand it off to the employer if you want. When I click approve, I can also select if the employer is in Compass, if I want to send them an email to have them approve it or not, or I can just approve it so that the student knows that the request has been approved, and then I, the educator, will work with the employer on setting up the time. So again, this step is approving the request for the student. The second step is working with the employer. So in this case, I have approved 2 job shadows for Sally Jones on the left. I can schedule them. I can provide input, maybe logistical details on what to expect. I can basically add it to my calendar. So on the right, you're seeing the detail for that particular job shadow request and employer. I have the contact information, the name and email. I can send the employer, if I do decide that I want them to approve something, or maybe they've requested it, I can send them an email. And then I can also offer the job shadow to the student on behalf of the employer. So maybe in that scenario, I'm calling Curtis, I'm talking to him. There's a student that really wants to do a shadow with you. Are you cool with that? Sure, we'd love to do it on Friday. We can do it any Friday from 8 to 10. Awesome. I'll work with the student on their schedule and then we'll get back to you. And then when you're ready, you can set the date and you can basically send out invites to everyone. If you do want the employer to approve it, the employer will get an email that there's a job shadow request waiting for their approval, and then they can actually log into Compass and approve it. And I'll show you kind of how that works in just a second. If you do decide for whatever reason to use the agreement, the electronic agreements functionality for job shadows, all you need to do is click on the little icon that is circled. And then if you've created a workflow for job shadows, again, it could be permission slips, whatever your school requires, you can basically get that all going and collect signatures electronically. You can ask for more information. We're going to be building a way for you to actually get attachments back, maybe a copy of a driver's license or something. But if you need that functionality, that's there for you. And then basically after you have scheduled the job shadow and it's been defined, you've sent out invites, we are building a way for you to track all of the shadows that you have going on. So this being a test student and a test company, I don't have a lot of activity, but you can see here when I click on the view detailed schedule, it opens up a monthly view that tells me that Sally Jones has a job shadow scheduled on March 12th. And if I want, I can click on that and get the details, who the contact person is, a little bit more information on the date, all that good stuff. Whether or not there are any agreements or anything that you need to track. This is something that is useful if you want to make this view available to others, then they maybe know not to count a student as being absent because the student has an approved job shadow that they're going to be gone for. In addition, you can export this list so that you can have it in an Excel spreadsheet. And you can also, with any job shadow, with any specific student that has an approved job shadow, you can send the invite to anyone you want. I'll show you where you do that, but maybe you have a centralized calendar somewhere that tracks all the different job shadows. You can just send a calendar invite to that email or that calendar. Or if you want to include a record of this to like a teacher. So the student is supposed to be in an automotive class, but they're not going to be there because they're going to be at a job shadow. If you want to make sure the student knows that, or the teacher knows that, you can send the teacher an email if you want to. In terms of approvals, if you want the student and the employer to approve these, you can do either. So in the student view back in Compass, when a job shadow is offered by the employer or when you approve it for the student can go in and basically see that they've been offered a job shadow and they can accept it or decline it. Likewise, for the employer, if the employer is going to approve the job shadow, if you want them to do that, then they get a notification and then they just log into Compass, they go to applications, job shadows, and then they approve the job shadow. We will be working on a process where you actually don't have to be involved in the approvals at all, where basically you can just track that the student has created their own job shadow opportunity and add it to your calendar. But there are some scenarios where the student is managing all of that directly with the employer, but you still might want a record of that in your overall list. But in this scenario, we're kind of using you as the glue that is bringing all this together. But in some cases, the student might be totally capable of setting up their own shadows, and maybe you're actually encouraging that because you're trying to help them develop skills in terms of reaching out to people and asking for things from them. So that is a very high level overview of this process. We tried to make it as simple as possible. I'm going to pause and see if there are any questions on the slides, and then I'm going to go in and do a real demo in the Pro Center and with a student. Any questions?
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
I'm just in the process now, when you're saying they are notified, at what point does that employer then get an email to go to the HR contact that's on file with Compass? So for example, on the employer side, when they say, yes, contact the employer, I'm interested in a job shadow. What does that look like then on the employer side for them to be able to respond? And is there like a turnaround time for response to that student sort of included, Patrick?
Yep. That's a great question. So in terms of a turnaround time, the email that we send to the employer, and I'll actually show you what that looks like as part of the demo, we don't necessarily give them like a timeline, like you must respond within 2 days, but we do send reminders. We've actually, sometimes they miss the email, sometimes it maybe doesn't go through or it goes to junk. So we've been doing a lot of work to make sure that they're getting the emails, and if they don't respond, we are sending reminders. We do that also for work-based applications as well. In terms of who that email goes to, currently that email will go to the primary contact on the employer record. Now, we are working on a way of letting an employer define different roles of their users. So do you want somebody to be the primary contact for job shadows, for work-based learning? We're also looking at ways of even doing that by location. That's something that we've had a lot of you ask about, which is Butler Machinery's primary contact is Riley, but Riley is in Fargo. But if I have a student in Dickinson that wants to do a job shadow with Butler, what's going to happen today is Riley will get that email, but it might actually be somebody local that we want to get that email. So we will be training employers on how they should respond and navigate all that. And then we'll basically make sure that the employers have set up their Compass accounts correctly. And that, Shanda, I will be talking about as part of our next steps. Just like we're rolling this out to you all, we also really need to roll this out to employers and make sure that they're aware of how this all works.
Thank you. I'm glad that's part of the conversation.
Yep, cool. Any other questions before I get into a real demo? Okay, so this is where it always gets interesting. So I'm going to open up my browser, and I'm going to basically go into Are You Ready as a student, and I'm going to start with the process of a student requesting a job shadow. Now, this is a test student. It's associated with a school that Laura and Zap and I use for testing, but the experience will be exactly the same for your students. It just might be that the employers will look a little bit different. So the way that a student would find opportunities is they'd click on the opportunity button, and then they can go to employers and select based on that card that I was mentioning to you, highlighting that option.
Patrick,
Or they can,
are we supposed to be seeing what you're doing right now?
oh yes, did it stop sharing?
Can
Oh,
someone
wait.
else maybe, but maybe it's just me.
How's that? Can you see? How about now?
There we go.
That was weird. Okay. Could you guys see my slides before when I was going through things?
Yes.
Okay, good. That's a relief. Okay, so again, I go into Are You Ready? I'll kind of start over. I go to Compass, and then I go to Opportunities. And this is where, again, I'm going to see career profiles, college programs, links to work-based learning in Are You Ready? If I'm standalone, I'll see work-based learning opportunities directly here. And under employers, this is where I'm going to be able to do those filters and narrow down on the companies that are offering shadows. So let me just show what that looks like. If I'm a student and I'm really interested in, let's say, health sciences. So I click on the health sciences career cluster filter. I want to see who's offering job shadows. I can click on connection options and choose job shadows. And now I've got all of these companies that have basically opted in Compass to offer job shadows that meet my needs. So if I'm the student, I can click and just add them to my list. I can also go to request job shadows, and I'll see those two that I just picked. If I want, I can add additional ones. I can scroll through this list and see all the different companies that are there. Or I can create my own. If I can't find the employer for whatever reason, I can go ahead and just put them in. And I'm just gonna, in the interest of time, I'm just gonna create a fake one, Fargo Health Company. And I really want to shadow a nurse. Okay, and I don't have a contact, so I can add that to my list. What the student would then do is they're going to move these around. They're going to bump them up. They're going to bump them down. They're going to put in the jobs that they'd like to shadow. Because I want to show you the full demo, I'm actually going to add an employer that is a fake employer called Current Flow Innovations. We've used that in a lot of our demos. So I'm going to go ahead and I will approve a job shadow for Current Flow so you can see how it works for an employer. So I can move these up. I can type in what I'm looking for if I want. I can put in whatever I want. I'm not sure. Maybe with SMP Health, I'm not sure what I'm looking for. But the student can remove things. They can add more if they want. You might have processes in place at your school, like you want students to do so many job shadows a month or a year or whatever. Maybe you only want them to pick one, or maybe you want them to pick 5. But at the end of the day, when you're ready, the student would submit. We do ask the student to provide the email and phone number if we don't have it, because you're going to want to communicate with the student and potentially even help connect the employer and the student. This is not shared with the employer unless you decide to include that employer in the approval. And in some cases, we already will have this. So we just ask the student to input it if we don't. When I submit this, what's going to happen is you are going to receive an email that a student has requested a job shadow. And you can see how the students, their status has changed to submit it to school. The shadow, the opportunity that's going to come up, looks like somebody had just posted work-based learning right before this, which is awesome. So this is the example that goes out to a student for a job shadow. And basically, you're going to be able to see this and you're going to be able to approve it. It's just a way to make sure that you know that this student is available and is something that you have to approve. Okay. I'm going to now go into the Pro Center. So this is the world that you all live in. So give me a second here and I will get that open. So I'm going to go ahead and in the Pro Center, you're going to go into your school. I'm going to change my school. So it asks me to log in again. Bear with me. I'm going to go into the school that that is technically a test school. And now everything that we're doing for job shadows is going to be done in the Compass console. So if you click on the Work-Based Learning tab, Compass console, and then launch the console, that's where we're going to have all this information available to you. You're going to go into the Job Shadow Management screen, which is going to be clicking on this gear icon and then Job Shadows. We're going to redo our top navigation. So right now I don't love how that's kind of buried in the gear icon, but that's where it is for right now. And as it gets more usage, we'll put it in a more prominent place. This is where you can see that Gwen has requested 4 shadows and they need my attention. I need to do something with it. You're going to see 1 row here for every student. So if you've got 10 students requesting 5 job shadows each, you're going to see 10 students listed and they each would have 5 shadows for you to approve or request. So if I open this up, I can see the preference of the student. I can see that these 3 employers exist in Compass. So if I want, I can send them an email for approval. This one does not exist. So I can basically create an opportunity. I can create their opportunity if I want. If the student had indicated a name or an email or a phone number, I could see that by clicking on this button. In this case, the student did not provide any of that information. And for all of these, you will also be able to click and see who the person is, the point of contact for that particular organization. So it's a little bit easier for you just to know who to call. And this goes back to Shanda's question. Eventually, we will have a job shadow role within the employer. For the most part, it's going to be the primary contact, but there could be some larger organizations where they have a separate person who manages those requests. I'm going to reject these, and I'm going to approve the current flow innovations. And I'm actually going to include an email being sent to the employer because, again, this is a fake company. So when I approve it, it's going to go to the next stage, which is employer approvals. This is now where I'm waiting to hear back from the employer on whether or not they're going to approve it, or I can approve it on their behalf. So all I do is I click on the job shadow. I can send them another request email if they haven't responded. I could give them a call. I can basically approve it for the employer, or I could reject it on behalf of the employer. I can also set the schedule once I start communicating with the employer about what that looks like. The email that the employer will get is they will get this email from Golden Path saying new job shadow request. Basically, a student has requested a job shadow, and if they want, they can click here and we will take them immediately to Compass, where they can then approve that request in the system. But again, you may or may not want to use that. You may just contact the employer directly if you want. I can then set the schedule. So let's say I've communicated with the employer and I've looked at the student's calendar and I know that they are going to do the job shadow. Let's say I'll do March 23rd. It's going to start at 8. a.m. and it's going to end at 12 p.m. So that is now saved with this opportunity, but I can also send the student an invite, and I can also send a copy of this invite to whoever I want. I can put in an email. I can put in multiple emails, maybe a shared calendar. Maybe you want to send it to the parent, whoever you want to send it to. We kind of left this a little bit open-ended, but eventually we might provide options, like send it to the person, send it to the student's parent if we have that email. But again, we kind of want you all to decide who you want to send that invite to. When that invite goes out to the student, they will actually get essentially a calendar invite that they will be able to add to their calendar. We'll wait for it to come in here. And then the student will also be able to see the shadows that they've been offered in Are You Ready? So if I go back into Job Shadows, I go back into this into the system here and refresh, I will now see that these are the statuses of my shadows. It's not been approved yet by Current Flow Innovations, but I can see that it's been submitted. And I'll go ahead and approve it on behalf of Current Flow. Now it's showing as in progress. I can see the date of the shadow. And if the student wants, or if you want, the student can then go in. They will get a notification that it's been approved, and then they can go in and they can accept it. Again, if you want them to. This isn't necessarily a required step, but it is a nice way of that student then acknowledging, I've gotten the shadow, I've seen it, I know that it's happening, and I can accept it.
Patrick, we have a great question in the chat.
Yeah.
If we need to send a copy to several teachers, do we need to send separate emails, or can we put multiple email addresses in the one spot?
Yeah, we will be able to do multiple emails. I think we might have to provide a little bit more guidance on the delimiter. But just like Outlook, I think we would use the semicolon for that, but I can confirm that with my developer or with our development team.
Thank you.
Yep. So the student has accepted the shadow. This is the invite that comes through. So I now have the job shadow on my calendar. The student can accept it. We will send out reminders. I think it's a week before and a day before the shadow. The reminder does not have the calendar invite in it. So if the student deleted that or whatever, then you could resend another invite, but we don't want the student to have like 3 invites or 3 sessions on their calendar for the same thing. So the first one is going to be the invite itself that they can accept, and then they will get reminders. And then per the comment with the, or per my comment on the schedule, after you have more and more job shadows, if you click on this view detailed schedule, we will show you all the different days that you have a shadow scheduled. In this case, Gwen is on the 23rd, and then you'll be able to open it up, confirm with the employer that it's good to go. And basically, it's really more for your ability to kind of keep track of all this stuff.
Another
We might
question
be
about,
adding.
sorry,
Go
Patrick.
ahead.
Another
Go ahead.
question about the calendar is, if they put their own email in that spot, does it automatically populate into that professional's calendar? Say the counselor, career advisor, work-based learning coordinator. Could they send it to themselves and have it populate into maybe their Outlook calendar?
Yep, for sure. So yeah, if you wanted to send that invite, just like I sent it to the student, you could put in your own email and have it sent to your calendar, so you have it blocked on your calendar. That's kind of where I was going back to. Eventually, we might even have an ability for us to just have you check, like, do you want a notification too? Because we actually have your emails, but what we didn't want to clutter up your mailbox. We're not sure if every educator wants to use it that way. Some are using a shared mailbox for job shadows, and then some would just use Compass to keep track of when things are happening. And then you can also export the list to Excel. So if for some reason you wanted to upload them somewhere else, or if you wanted to even share the list with an administrator or somebody that's kind of like highlighting job shadow experiences, you could send this report to them every week or whatever. And it's kind of a nice way of just showing who the students are that are participating in the job shadow, who the employer is. We added the job, and then when it's scheduled. But what we're trying to do there is how do we maybe give props to the employers that are getting these scheduled? And then also how do we maybe get other students excited about taking advantage of this? So this could be sent to your marketing team or whatever you want to do, however it works for you all. So that is basically the flow of the process. I will just show you super quick on the employer side what they see. And I also want to show you how they opt into job shadows. So if you are working with employers and getting them signed up, this might be useful for you. And then I'll go back to the PowerPoint. The application for the job shadow is going to show up under applications. All the employer does is click on job shadows and they will see the information. In this case, I've already approved it, but I can open it up. And I can also see if the student has updated their profile, just like we share information with the student on work-based learning, we can share that same information with the employer for a job shadow application. So the employer knows a little bit more about what's like the student's background and all that different stuff. And then for this employer to actually make sure that they are eligible for job shadows, all they need to do when they create their account is go into the connections database and make sure that they have this box checked, job shadow. And this is where the employers can select all those other options too, like I'd like to be in career fairs, or I'd like to work with students with special needs, or a job coach, or whatever it might be. We just want to make sure that they've got this job shadow button checked. And if you create an employer on their behalf and invite them to it, we will default the job shadow option to be ticked. I think Eric Nygaard from Devil's Lake is on. I know he registered, but when Eric added employers to Compass, potentially to facilitate with job shadows, we're going to default their job shadow option ticked so that students can start selecting them. And we actually know that employers want to get those connections. So we actually think that if employers are getting requests, they can still reject it, but at least they know students are looking at them and they're interested in what they offer. And maybe that spurs a different kind of engagement. Like, I can't do a job shadow, but I'd love to come speak to your class, or whatever that might be. Any questions before I wrap up with a couple more thoughts before we're done for the day?
Patrick, could you pop back to the student view of their job shadow experiences? I have just a quick, easy question.
Yeah. Yep. Let me go back into Are You Ready? And go to Compass. And then the job shadow, because the job shadow is a thing that they've actually applied for, I'm going to go to My Activity, and then I will go to Job Shadows.
Well, that alone was worth a refresher on that process. Thank you. I was just curious, next to the student accepted to the right, is the now after you rejected it looks like almost like a print icon. Is that a print icon? And then if they click the red one, is that to delete?
Yep. So this will remove the request from the student's list. So if the student wanted to get rid of these, because the student can actually submit as many requests as they want. So they could theoretically remove this one, and then they could add another one if they wanted to. And this icon is when there's a rejection, what we want to do is ultimately have you all provide a reason why it was rejected. So if you clicked on this, it would provide, if I had added a reason why I rejected it, that would show here to the student.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay, a few tips and tricks. I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint. I want to be respectful of your time, so I'll try to wrap this up quickly. Again, if you want to get employers engaged, but they're not super responsive, you can always create an account for them. In the Compass console, just go to My Employers, Employer Connections, and then Create Employer. Job Shadow will be a default option. We're going to default Job Shadow, Career Fair, and Guest Speaking. Those are going to be the 3 default options. They can always go back and turn those off. But for the most part, almost every employer that signs up checks those 3. I would encourage students to apply for job shadows, especially maybe students that are thinking about work-based learning. Job shadows are a nice way to kind of get to know the environment at a high level. And again, some employers are even requesting that as a prereq for work-based learning. Encourage students to use those filters that I mentioned. Eventually, we will be offering as a filter whether or not an employer is offering a sponsorship or tuition reimbursement. So if you had a student that was wanting to find help paying for school, a really great thing for them to do would be show me the employers that are offering tuition reimbursement, show me the employers that are offering job shadows that are in the industry that I want to be in, and then use the job shadow as a way to start getting that student connected to employers that might be willing to help them pay for school. And then also student interest. When we're talking to employers, it's always fun to go to an employer and say, we were at a class yesterday and 3 kids were asking about careers in your space. You really should get involved, maybe offer work-based learning or job shadows. So if a student does put in their own employer, use that as an opportunity to get that employer engaged and in the system. And then remember that an employer in the system for your school can then be available for other schools in the region, which is kind of a win for the employer to help them scale. In terms of next steps, we're going to be, this is going to be the focus of our monthly employer newsletter that we send out. We just sent one out about summer jobs and work-based learning opportunities. The next one will be on job shadows and what they can expect when they get that email. We will be incorporating job shadows into our recommended engagement framework when we talk to employers. So if we're at an HR conference or if we're speaking to a group of employers at a chamber event or a commerce event or job service, we always talk to them about ways of engaging with students at different, like freshmen, sophomores, juniors, seniors. We will be incorporating job shadows as one engagement methodology along with work-based learning, career fairs, and sponsorships. I've mentioned a few new features that we are already working on, where a student could create a job shadow that could end up in your calendar without you having to do anything. Tying job shadow requests and specifically the jobs that they're selecting to the ONET jobs that the employer has selected on either their career profiles, their work-based learning opportunities, or even their employer profile. And then finally, we want to tie job shadows to event registrations. Some of you probably saw that we now allow you to promote events to your employers. In this model, we can basically say, hey, employer, come to this career fair, and if you're offering job shadows, we have a way of getting you to register. We'll send out a quick tips guide on this to you all so that you can see how this works with some quick navigation. And like always, if you have feedback, you can send that to Laura or myself. We'd love to understand how we can make the process easier and fit within your process, but we also want to try to create a consistent experience for employers. So if they're doing job shadows across the state, they kind of know what to expect, which we think will encourage them to offer more. So with that, thank you all very much for the time. I'm going to give it back to Laura for any last minute questions or any closing remarks, and then we can wrap up for today. So Laura, back at you.
All right. You might want to keep sharing your screen for now. I did have one follow-up question. First, Eric Nygaard wanted to give you a little shout out and say that it is a little bit of work in the beginning stages, but it does certainly help with organizing once it all gets going. The students are requesting job shadows, but he'd like to see if you could show us if employers have went in and added their own information. And Eric, feel free to unmute yourself if you want to add anything to that right now. And anyone else, if you have questions, just pop them in the chat and we'll get to them. And if not, if there's so many questions we can't get to them all, we'll make sure and follow up with email responses and share those with everyone.
Yeah, so Eric, I think you might be, so you had created some employer accounts in Compass and then invited the employer to the account. Are those the ones you're asking about? I'll assume that that's the case. So what happens is if you all create an employer account and you invite them to the account, what'll happen is, and I'll go into, I'm not even sure if this one is set up, but I'm going to go into Qdoba, which is a Grand Forks organization. What'll happen is the organization, the contact will show up here, but it will have a status of pending, meaning they haven't activated their account or their invitation yet. Once they do that, then what'll happen is some of you get emails when there's a new employer that's in the system. Sometimes you might get several of them in a day, but once the employer updates and creates their account and you get that email saying there's a new organization available for your school, that's when you know that the employer has gone in and actually activated their account. And then our hope is that they will go through and they will update their overviews, put in more information, add pictures, and all that good stuff. But until you get that email, the employer has not created the account yet. They've not responded. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to us and let us know. We'll be able to look that up for you. We also do send reminders that you've got an invitation pending that you've not activated yet. Hopefully that answers that question.
Got another good question. Oh, yes, sorry.
Okay, I got a new monitor, so I'm not sure how it all works yet. That answers my question. I think Joe's Sports Center was really good at going in and updating their information. So no, I just wanted to make sure that instead of going through all of them again, to make sure that we know how to do it.
Yeah, and I would say, so this is an example. So Eric, when you created Joe's Sports Center, it was probably very basic. Again, we want you guys to put in as little time as possible, but at least get it started. And then once you've sent them the invitation, we can send reminders. They also will get our employer newsletter. So we're trying to get them engaged and get them familiar with the process. It's not done yet, but just kind of a preview of a feature we're going to be working on is we're actually going to try to develop a stack ranking for employers that will help dictate as we continue to grow and grow and grow. We want to make sure that employers that are participating in a good way kind of get to the top of the list. So for example, we might say, if you're an employer account that's offering job shadows or work-based learning opportunities or tuition reimbursement programs, or even how complete your profile is, you're going to get ranked a little bit higher than a company that puts in the bare bones, maybe doesn't offer anything, maybe they set it up and they kind of forgot about it. We're even thinking about using, Shanda, to your point, response times on offerings. So the sooner you respond, the higher you go in the list. Those are some examples of some things that we're working on to try to drive the right behavior on the employer side.
Okay, to that end, Patrick, in the chat, is there a plan or time frame on when GPS will be contacting the business contacts so that they're fully aware and updated on the new process so that none of the emails will go into no man's land if they were to start using this right away? What's your timeline and plan?
Yep. So basically, we send out an employer notification. It usually goes out in the middle of the month, and we send out our newsletter, which a lot of you probably receive. That also goes out, I think it's like the second Tuesday of the month. So we've already been putting information about job shadows into those communications. The next one will probably go out like in 2 weeks. And what we'll do too is we get copied on every email that goes out. So we'll see if a student requests a job shadow. And then what we're doing is we're reaching out to those organizations so they know what those are. I think we had a couple with Sanford Health, with Mackenzie Tadek when we were up there in Northern Cass a little bit ago. And I think there was also some Dickinson students that had clicked on a job shadow, actually some middle school students. But this is an example of the communications that we send out to employers. This will be our communication and our launch of the job shadow process with them. And if you do have any employers that reach out to you or they have questions or whatever, let us know. We might also be giving a heads up to some of our local chambers that we've been doing partnerships with, so they can also promote job shadow as being a workforce development strategy, which actually will help drive awareness too. And we've been working with several chambers across the state on some of those things. But I'd say in 2 weeks is when we'll send out our next blog on job shadow processes. Any other questions? Okay, well, you guys have been awesome. I It's always good to see everybody. Hopefully we'll see a lot of you in person soon. I know Laura's getting some training scheduled. So Laura, I'll hand it back to you for wrap up. And
All
it's
right.
good to see everybody.
All right. Thank you, Patrick, for sharing all this great new information about your latest feature in Compass. Really excited about that. If all of you think about questions that you wish you would have asked during this session, go ahead and shoot them to me or to Patrick. And if those of you who might be watching a recording of this, just follow up with us. You know, we're always available to help. And thank you all for coming. And I look forward to seeing you at our next training opportunity. Have a great day.